along the way or want to reach out over email or Zoom with me, let me know. So I'll dive right in and probably will not keep you all for an hour, but we'll see. Sometimes I just keep talking. So let's say you've gotten the interview, you're getting ready to go interview with the employer. There's many things that employers are doing that are different these days. Some of them are doing screening interviews, which are just calls in the beginning, just to ask candidates a few questions in the beginning so they know if it's a right fit. Many employers are also divulging salaries in advance just to make sure the candidate is comfortable with the salary. So things are definitely changing and there is a lot more transparency these days. If you have been offered an interview, typically a recruiter from that company will be scheduling it. And just know that that recruiter also has a say in the interview, in the hiring process. I sat in many rooms with many hiring managers and partners, and they would ask for my opinion on candidates, and it would be taken into account when we came down to hard decisions. So make sure you're very professional with the recruiter, you're being responsive when they're emailing you. And that's why it's really important you put your best, the email that you check the most on your resume. You may think your Tulane email looks the best, but if you're not checking it all the time, put your Gmail. And if you don't have a professional looking Gmail account, make sure you get one and try using that one more often. That is something that, you know, recruiters appreciate and hiring managers hear about if a candidate is being responsive and timely and is easy to work with during the interview scheduling process. So how to prepare for an interview, and I can send you all these materials. Prepare online. If the recruiter is able to give you the names of the people who you're going to be interviewing with, Google them. Definitely do your research on the company that you're going to go interview with. A typical interview question they could start out with, well, tell us what you know about us. And you want to know the history of the company and a few key points about the company and what interests you most about working there. Companies that, here you point out certain milestones that they've hit or things that you really think are valuable about working there. These are just things that you've learned about the company online. They will be impressed that you've done your research on the company. Oftentimes I would talk to someone who was, in a position of power where I was the recruiter. And if the candidate had done their homework on that person and had mentioned some things about them in the interview that they had read about online, I did recruiting at law firms and at a tech company. Lots of things that happen are written in articles online that you can read about. When I interviewed at Tulane and the dean who was recently here, I read about online that she was hosting dinners for students at her home. And I brought that up in the interview and her eyes lit up and she wanted to talk about it more. And she's like, yes, like pre-COVID, I was hosting dinners, and she's like, that reminds me, I need to start doing that again. And it really just changed the tone of the interview. And it was just a quick Google search and something that I had read about online. And I thought was a really cool thing that she was doing. And she loved that I brought it up. So do your homework on the company, make notes, read over them before you go into the interview. And if you do have the opportunity to have the people who are interviewing you, their names, also see if there's anything on them about LinkedIn or an article online that you can reference. So number 2 is going to be prepare your outfit. And when, it's the day of that interview, even if it's an interview that's just on Zoom, you want to make sure you are wearing something just classic that's not too eye-catching. You never want to be the person who everyone refers to, oh, remember the guy with the big red tie with the white polka dots, or what, you want them to just remember you for you and not for what you're wearing. I just do recommend solids, simple. Dress for Success is a great organization here in New Orleans. It's just for women, but it's when women donate their suits, and it's just a great place where you can go, and it's a nonprofit. You get everything for free for an interview. So I'll send that information out after this presentation. And certainly there are just many places that have some really nice clothes that are inexpensive but can look nice for an interview. And you can have one outfit ready for your interview, but if they call you back for a second interview, you also want to have another outfit ready. I suggest you try these things on before the day of your interview, just so you make sure they all fit properly. You have a belt that matches, a purse that matches. But just keep it simple: a white shirt and a black suit jacket and plain pants. And they'll remember you for what you said and your personality and your answers, as opposed to what you're wearing. So prepare your materials. And I know we don't like to print out a lot of things, but I have seen this happen. So if you're going to an interview in person, bring extra copies of your resume and also a list of potential questions for you to ask at the end of the interview. I once was going down to the reception area to greet a candidate, to bring them to the interview room to meet with some attorneys at the firm where I was working. And the attorneys had already run into the candidate in the receptionist area, and they walked the candidate to the conference room and they started the interview before I was even able to meet the candidate. So I walked into the conference room, and because I brought the recruiter usually gives copies of the resumes to the interviewers, and the candidate had already handed out her resume to all the attorneys in the room, and she just looked so prepared, right? There are things that can happen the day of the interview at the office where you're going. The person who you're interviewing with might have left your resume on the copy machine, meant to pick it up on the way to the conference room, forgot it. But says, oh, I need to go back to the copy room to get your resume, and you pull one out and say, oh, I printed an extra copy, you really look like you prepared well for that interview. It might not happen, but it's kind of like bringing an umbrella somewhere. It's probably not going to rain if you bring the umbrella, but if you bring the extra copies of your resume, you might need them. Also, if you are interviewing over Zoom, I do suggest that you have your resume pulled up in a PDF. And if for some reason that the person who is interviewing you doesn't have a copy, you can say, oh, I can share my screen. I have my resume pulled up. Give me 1 second, and you can share your screen and show them a copy of your resume. It's also something that you can pull up and reference. I like to have a copy of my resume with me when I am interviewing, just so if someone asks me about the dates of my employment or something like that, I can reference it myself. Next is going to be to prepare your route. When you are scheduled to go interview somewhere, it might be downtown New Orleans or any city you're in. Think, you might want to go drive by the day before, scope out where you're going to park, make sure you know where the building is, things along those lines. It can be really stressful the day of. So I do suggest, if it's not too much of a hassle, to maybe figure out those little details before your interview day, because the day of, we all have a lot going on with life and interviewing. And so I do suggest you make sure you prepare your route, figure in traffic times. You can, of course, look at your phone the day before at that time and see if there are any traffic delays, and add extra time in. You can always go sit in a coffee shop in the area before you have your interview and read over your resume, read over your potential questions to ask in the interview. It's great. I would say just be at your interview 15 minutes prior to the interview start time. It's a little bit stressful for the people who are interviewing you and the recruiter. If you show up 30 minutes before or an hour before, they're like, well, we're not ready. And so 15 minutes is probably the best amount of time. 15 to 10 minutes before your interview is a great time to show up for it. So prepare to be polite. So the minute you arrive in the parking lot, your interview begins. You might be riding in the elevator in the parking lot with someone who is actually interviewing you. You never know, so say hello. Be kind to the receptionist, the recruiter. Everyone matters. Everyone matters at that new company where you're going. And everyone is, knows each other already. And if there is some sort of confusing interaction between you and someone who works there, it could get relayed back to people. So just prepare. The minute you get in that parking lot, you go into interview mode and make sure you recognize that anyone you run into along the way could potentially be someone you're going to be meeting with that day. If you are interviewing at home, we all know, make sure your internet connection's working, have your laptop set up at a good height. You can do, I think it's zoom.test. You can test it, make sure you have a good Zoom background, have your background blurred out. We did a presentation last semester or 2 semesters ago with the women's basketball coach at Denver University, who is an alumni of SoPA. And she said in her DU interview, she put up the DU logo on the back as if she was already working there. And she said they loved it. So there are different fun things that you can, save on your background for your desktop. Just make sure it looks professional and you have it already set up for the time of your interview. There's so many great backgrounds. If you are using your own home background, just make sure it's a really plain background without any clutter in the space. I've been in interviews where afterwards the interviewers and I are like, what was that in the background? So I recommend you either blur out your space. You don't want the interviewers to be distracted at all, and use a professional background image. So prepare your elevator pitch. One of the first questions, and we'll dive into the practice interview questions here, which I'm happy to review with you all one-on-one over Zoom, and I'll share these with y'all before or after this presentation. Your elevator pitch is typically when you get into an interview, they start the interview by asking, tell us about yourself. And so you really want to be prepared and have a good 2 minutes of talking about yourself, they want to know who you are professionally. I like when someone tells me where they're from. You can start out with, I was born and raised in New Orleans. You can tell them where you went to undergrad, if you're getting a master's at Tulane. Tell them, and then you dive into, they don't want to know if you're married or if you have kids or you have pets. You want to dive into who you currently are after you give them a little bit of personal history, where you're from, what you're currently studying, and tell them, currently I'm in the MPA program at Tulane University. This is what I'm studying while in the program. I work part-time doing this. They really want you to sum up who you currently are and what your goals are, what you're working towards, and you can throw in why you want this position and why it caught your attention. And that is a great way to tell them about yourself while letting them know that you're really interested in this job. These other questions are definitely questions that I recommend students read through and have answers to. People love when you can give an example. And one of the questions that we're very familiar with is, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. And this is a hard question, and it gets asked very often. I was asked it when I interviewed at Tulane. I've asked candidates this question. Another question that is popular is, tell us about a time where you had a challenge at work and how you overcame it. Tell me about a time you had an issue with a colleague and how you overcame that challenge. So there are some really tricky questions that you want to have some very solid answers to. And, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Of course, you want to tell them that you're still with their organization and you're just growing with the organization. So these are all questions that I recommend students either write out the answers to, think of an example for, and practice. You can record yourself on your phone or your computer. And these questions, there aren't that many other questions that are asked. These are all I'm going to share on. These are also on LinkedIn, which is great. So if you go to LinkedIn, and it looks like I have a question. Yes. So someone asked, will I be sharing these documents? Yes, for sure. So if you go to LinkedIn and you click on the jobs tab and you click on interview prep, LinkedIn has graciously added these 26 common interview questions. I had made my list before. I saw LinkedIn's list, so some of them are very similar. But this is a great place if you are on LinkedIn to reference these 26 questions. Some of them might be different than mine, so definitely take a look. And you could also practice on LinkedIn and send someone a video of yourself practicing your answers to these questions and get feedback from them, which is awesome. So LinkedIn's great. We'll get back to it, but I highly recommend diving deep into LinkedIn. Oh, one more thing that I will share about the question about what are your strengths and weaknesses, and something that I thought of that I think is a good idea is, so we all know our strengths, right? And I would say that I'm very organized. And I could give examples. I keep charts of everything. I could go on and on and on about how organized I am and how I don't like to reinvent the wheel. So everything I do, I try to build upon and save um, and update. Now, for our weakness, we also we don't want to admit a really, it's hard to give a weakness and try to speak negatively about ourselves in an interview. So what I do recommend is you are honest and embrace your weakness. But the way to end that question on a positive note would be to tell them that you're working on it. And you really do have to be working on it to say that in an interview. And certainly there are YouTube videos about anything that is your weakness. And there are LinkedIn Learning courses. We all have access to LinkedIn Learning for free. I'll send you that link. And I have done many mock interviews with students, and almost all of them say time management is their weakness. If you go to LinkedIn and search LinkedIn Learning for time management, you'll see 7,912 results for videos on time management. And this is where you can get a certificate and add this to your LinkedIn profile. You can tell them in the interview that I've been working on my weakness. I even have obtained some certificates on LinkedIn Learning. They can see those on your profile. So this is a great place to go and add some certificates to your profile just so they know that you're telling the truth. You're working on your weakness, and you can say, I'm getting better at it and I'm learning a lot. So someone asked, my LinkedIn profile is verbatim of what's on my resume. Is that okay? That's actually perfect. As a former recruiter, that was part of our checklist was to look at people's social media. And one of those was LinkedIn. So you want to have all of your other social media hidden because recruiters are looking. That is part of the process. And when a recruiter goes to LinkedIn to look at your profile, they want to see that it matches your resume. They want to see that the dates match. They want to see that the job description match. So that is actually really important. And I'll show you on my profile, if I can get back to it. Here it is, where I have, and I'll send y'all, I have, you still have these little symbols in here. If you want to add a little bit of color to your LinkedIn, you can use Canva to create a LinkedIn banner. Recruiters do go to LinkedIn and look at candidates' LinkedIn profiles just to make sure that it's better to not have a LinkedIn profile if you are not updating it and it's not completely professional, or somehow hide that until it is. In my experience section, I only have my first two bullets from my resume. You can add your entire resume. This is just a personal preference to not have my entire resume on here. Here is where I have certifications. These are LinkedIn Learning certifications that you can add to your profile. I suggest you take advantage of it because, like I said, Tulane gives it to us for free. And when you complete a LinkedIn Learning certification, it'll ask you, do you want to post this? Do you want to add this to your profile? I often don't post it. I just add it to my profile. And then let's say I'm going through and I'm just kind of cleaning up my LinkedIn, and I think, oh, you know what? This one, I don't think I want this anymore. You can delete it. You can take new courses, add, delete if you think something's outdated or isn't relevant to your industry anymore. You know, this is all changeable. So someone's asking about a long CV. Definitely email me, whoever this is, and I'll send you a video of an alumni who gave a great presentation on how to shorten your resume and shorten everything that's on LinkedIn, because sometimes if we are older and we've had a lot of experience, we want to pare that down, and we want to not have everything on LinkedIn, not have everything on a resume. I do recommend you keep one long resume and then just have one that's really perfected. 1 to 2 pages would be the longest length I would recommend for a resume, unless you're doing a federal resume. So that is a little bit about LinkedIn, and I'll send you all, I did a presentation on a deep dive into optimizing your LinkedIn profile. I'll send you all the link to that if you want to see that. And so those are so these are the questions, like I mentioned, which I'll send y'all. And it's just really good to have an example of a story for each answer. It's just the best way to be able to explain your answers. And so it is something that you need to put in some time and effort for preparing for an interview. You know, how well do you work under pressure and deadlines? You can come up with a good example. And maybe it's something that has to do with your classes. And, you know, if there's a time when, you know, let's say you do all your assignments in advance, that would be great. I mean, you beat the deadlines for sure. So these are all good examples that you want to give in a resume. So let's see, I am going to jump back, and I'm going to get to these questions. I may answer them all at the end. So we've prepared your elevator pitch, you've reviewed the sample interview questions. In the end, when you get in that interview, I really try to remind myself when I'm in an interview to stay positive, to keep a smile on my face, think positive thoughts. It does really help to just keep that in mind for that 1 hour that you're in there. Once you leave the office, make sure you get the names of everyone that you interview with. If you are in touch with a recruiter, they can provide you with the names. A recruiter doesn't mind if you email them and say, hey, I missed, I want to just double check that these are the correct names of all the people who I met with, and send a thank you email. It's definitely email them within 24 hours to thank them for the interview. I don't mind, as a recruiter, if you do a group email to everyone who interviewed you, or you can send individual emails. It's really up to you. It's a personal preference. I think a group email is fine. They're not going to hold that against you. Individual emails are fine. It's just going to be a little bit more time consuming for you. I do think when you're writing your thank you emails to people, you want to reference some things that were discussed in the interview. You want to be specific. I really enjoyed learning about X, Y, and Z. So that is, I think, really important. A thank you email does not need to be very long. It can be just 2 paragraphs, just recognizing that you appreciate their time, you enjoyed hearing about certain things, you look forward to hearing back from them. A recruiter really appreciates a thank you email because the recruiter is doing a lot of work to get you in the door. And that does go a long way. So thank you emails are important. Not everyone sends them, and they are very appreciated. And it tells a lot about the interviewee. So prepare to be patient. Oftentimes it takes longer than expected to hear back from potential employers regarding an offer decision. Stay patient. What I recommend, if you interviewed, let's say on a Monday, wait 1 week and a day if you haven't heard back to follow up with them. So you would email them the following Tuesday. These things take time behind the scenes. They are interviewing other candidates. Maybe someone who has to make the final hiring decision is out of town, they're on vacation, they're out of town, they're at a conference for work. There's also budgeting that is involved in that. They need to call your references. There's all types of things that are involved behind the scenes that go into the hiring process. So 1 week really isn't that long. So I recommend you wait 1 week and a day and you just follow up, just 2 or 3 sentences, say, hey, I would, more formal than that. Dear so-and-so, I would like to follow up on my candidacy for this position. I really enjoyed my interview there. I want to let you all know I remain interested in the position and I hope to hear back from you soon. That's it. And then they'll reply to that and get back to you, and they'll let you know we're interviewing other candidates, we're waiting on a final decision, something like that. They are trying. It just does take a lot longer than people think. So be patient. I know it's hard. I've been in these shoes. And prepare your references. I'll send you all this references template. So you don't need to provide references to anyone until they ask for them. When a company asks for references, that means they're most likely about to give you the offer. Recruiters don't waste their time calling references unless they're at that point where they're about to give you an offer. It's super time consuming for the recruiter. It's a lot of back and forth and voicemails and getting that person on the phone. So I recommend you complete this to have this ready to go. And when they ask for your references, you can send them to them via email right away. When, a lot of people think that a reference needs to be someone who was a boss. It does not need to be someone who was your boss. It can be someone who was your equal, who you worked with, or someone below you. It doesn't matter. It's just someone who knows your work ethics, someone who is going to say great things about you when they get that phone call. And for my references, I have one boss, someone who was my equal, and someone who was below me. And I just know that these 3 people, when they get a phone call, they're going to be like, oh my God, Susan's awesome. Like, you all should hire her. That's what you want to be certain that these people are going to say. A recruiter calls references because there's a lot that they can learn from someone's tone of voice than through an email. I would immediately know if a candidate was good if the person that I called got excited when they got the phone call. When I am interviewing for a job and I do give my references to the employer, I text all 3 of those people and give them an update. I say, I am in the interview process for a job at Tulane University. This is the title. I'm in the final steps of the interview process. I gave them your contact information as a reference. 2 of my references don't live in New Orleans. So I say, Please be on the lookout for a 504 number. And then all of them wrote me back after I was interviewing at Tulane, and they said, um, I heard from Vanessa, who's now my boss, and we had a good conversation. Typically, companies ask for 3 references. Um, if they don't say how many they want, I would just give 3. 3 is definitely the industry standard. And so you should have 3 ready to go. So back to part of our preparing for an interview process. So continue to apply to jobs while you are even interviewing. It just keeps the momentum going. You never know if you are going to get a job. Individuals can say things in an interview leading you to believe that you're going to get a job. You never have the job until you have it in writing. So even while you're interviewing for a job, I know it's more work, keep applying to other jobs. When I was interviewing at Tulane, I also got a phone call from Loyola, started interviewing there. It just keeps the energy going, the momentum going. If I didn't get the job at Tulane, I was interviewing at Loyola. There were other places that were reaching out to me. It's kind of about the energy and keeping it going through the process. And sometimes decisions can take a long time. Employers can change their mind and close a position. You just never know. So keep applying, even when you think you might be getting the job. It's never certain until that offer is in writing and you get it with your salary, start date, all that. Prepare to be responsive throughout the entire interview process. I know I mentioned this before. Make sure you're checking your email, cell phone, voicemail messages. It drove me absolutely bananas when candidates did not have a voicemail set up. If candidates were not replying to my emails, I was wondering, like, why did they give me this email address? They're not responding. Respond to all calls and emails as soon as possible. It is not frowned upon if you reply within 5 minutes. That's great. There's no like waiting game going on when you're interviewing. Reply as soon as possible to get the ball rolling. There are other candidates that the recruiters are working with, and if you are responsive and you get in the door sooner and they like you, they'll make you an offer before they meet with other candidates. So make sure you are being responsive. One thing that someone asked to use the Google Voice number or actual cell phone number. It's completely your personal preference. Whatever phone you are going to answer, provide that number. It's really rough when the recruiter cannot get in touch with the candidate. And I've seen it happen. One thing that I missed, we all make mistakes, right? I missed. So I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier. When you go to an interview, bring copies of your resume. But also, they always ask at the end of an interview, do you have any questions for us? And you always have to have answers. I mean, always have to have questions. And some of the questions they may have already answered in an interview. So when I interviewed at Tulane, I printed out these questions to ask and I had them with me. And at the end of the interview, when they said, do you have any questions for us? I said, and you can do this on a Zoom interview too. I said, I do. I prepared some questions. If you don't mind, I'm going to just review them really quickly and see what questions I have. I recommend you maybe ask 2, max 3 questions. And you can, and I could just tell when I looked down and had my questions typed out, they were all like, oh, wow, she prepared for her interview. Some of the questions, like I said, are already going to have been answered in the interview. That's why you want to have a lot of questions written down just so you can have backup. And um, one really cool tip that I learned on TikTok is somehow recruiters are in my algorithm. TikTok just knows. One recruiter said, and I've told two people to do this and they've done it for their interviews. One recruiter said one of the best things she's ever seen was a candidate emailed her the morning of her interview and reconfirmed. Just send an email, subject line, reconfirming from my interview for today. Put your name in the subject, and then just wrote the recruiter saying, hi, Susan, I'm really looking forward to my interview today. I wanted to reconfirm my interview time, 10 a.m. I look forward to seeing you then. You can add anything if you've updated your resume since then. If you have a online portfolio that you want to share, if you want to add anything at that time, you can. But as a former recruiter, people cancel, people don't show up. I think it's an awesome tip. So the recruiter knows this person's coming today. It's a much harder job than people think it is. And candidates flake and they don't show up, or they call in sick 20 minutes before their interview and things like that. So to give that recruiter peace of mind that you are going to be there, you're looking forward to it, you've updated your resume, that is just golden. And I know one of the candidates who did that, she got the job. The other one is still in the interview process. I just think it shows that you're taking a lot of initiative and showing them that you are solid, you're going to show up, and you're going to be a great hire. That, I believe, is everything. I will go to some of the questions, asking when to use a CV or a resume. A CV is just a longer version of a resume. Typically, companies will ask for a CV when you're applying online. And so that's when you do a CV. A CV is also similar to a federal job resume, and it's a longer resume. It's everything you've ever done. I do have a federal resume template if anyone needs it. For anything else, a resume really should just be one page, just a snapshot of your work history. I've been working for a long time. I fit all of mine on one page. I play with the margins and I just get it all on there. I've cut some things out. Like I said, keep a long version. Don't ever delete anything you've ever done, because you might need a longer version of your resume in the future. Someone said that they're autistic, they have a non-traditional speaking style. Should they mention that during the interview? I do think that's something you could tell the recruiter while you are emailing with them, and let them know in advance. I've had candidates who have names that are hard to pronounce. My last name's hard to pronounce. So when they've come into the office, they let me know this is how I pronounce my name. That's easier to say in person when they're pronouncing things. If you have any handicaps or a non-traditional speaking style, definitely let the recruiter know, or anyone who you are in touch with prior to the interview, to let them know. They would love to have that information in advance. Um, and so if asked for a second interview, should I prepare differently? And typically a second interview is just going to be with different people. I would continue to read up on the company, continue to review your typical practice interview questions, and you know, have some have great examples for all the questions. See if you can get the names of the people who you're interviewing with. You can, in your second interview, reference your first interview, say, oh, I really enjoyed meeting with Michael and discussing this. Um, Typically a second interview is called because you made it through the first round. Sometimes first rounds are going to be over Zoom or over the phone. And a second round is just for you to move forward in the process and meet with more people, just so they have more people to be involved in that decision process. Someone's asking if they can schedule an appointment with me. If you are a SoPA student, you definitely can. I will send a link to my Calendly when I send you all a follow-up email prior to this, and you can schedule an appointment with me. I am just for SoPA. All other schools at Tulane do have career services departments, so you would need to reach out to NTC or the business school or whatever school you're in to make an appointment with a career counselor in those departments. So I think that's it. I'm getting out here a little bit early today, and I will follow up with y'all via email later on this afternoon with all the documents that I shared. So thank you all for attending and have a great weekend.